Hello and welcome to Boson Protocol's 5th dCommerce Meetup. I'm delighted to be your host for the night. I'm Rhian Lewis, Boson Core Contributor. I'm a writer and developer who's passionate about all things decentralized and about Boson Protocol, of course. At Boson Protocol, we believe that in order to protect the future of all commerce, it needs to be decentralized. That journey begins with Metaverse commerce, which is why we're delighted to be hosting a panel discussion tonight on open commerce Metaverse economies. And speaking of the Metaverse, if you're not already in Decentraland, please come and join us in the Crypto Valley Convention Center there. The coordinates are in the Crowdcast chat, so come and join us over on Decentraland, please. Quick update. At Boson, we're working with an incredible development and advisory team. Leading our protocol design is Aditya Asgar-Onkar, who's a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, researching consensus protocols for ETH2. And he also previously worked on dual deposit escrow systems for digital products. Along with Aditya, we've also got Nick Mudge as a smart contract architect. Nick wrote the smart contracts for Avagotchi, which is a DeFi-enabled NFT game, and is also the author of the EIP 2535 Diamonds. Recently, we've also hired Misha Tuffield, PhD, as our CTO. Now, Misha formerly worked at Monolith, which is the first crypto project to plug directly into Visa's systems. Alongside these guys, we've currently got 25 developers in both internal and external teams working across our projects. And in terms of our mainnet launch, we're having our smart contracts audited in the very near future, and we'll be launching during Q4. While I'm talking developers, we're also hiring for these key roles: senior blockchain engineers, global director of ecom, and a QA engineer that's worked at both protocol level and on dApps. So please check out our jobs. You can find our jobs board at https://boards.greenhouse.io Boson Protocol, and you'll find that link in the Crowdcast chat. Also, another really important announcement, especially for people who are into POAPs, that's pretty much all of us, right? So everyone who's attending tonight also has the opportunity to win 500 Boson tokens through minting an exclusive POAP. So all you need to do is jump into Decentraland, mint the POAP, and then one lucky wallet will be chosen at random to receive 500 Boson. Can't go wrong. So we've got this panel tonight, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Justin Banon, Boson Protocol co-founder, Jamie Burke, Outlier Ventures co-founder and CEO, Rhian Gill, Crucible co-founder and CEO. So first of all, one by one, Justin first, what do you do? What is your part in the open metaverse?
Hi, Rhian. Hi, everyone. We're building Boson Protocol, and Boson is a core piece of the metaverse, enabling digital to physical redemption in a trust minimized way.
Jamie.
Outlier Ventures is an accelerator dedicated to the open metaverse. We're lucky to say that we've got both Boson and Crucible in it, so it's great to have both of them here. And I think it really highlights the synergy that hopefully will become apparent over the course of this panel as to the portfolio, something that we regard as the Open Metaverse OS, so an operating system for the Open Metaverse.
Awesome. I'm going to be asking you about that later. Really fascinating topic. And Rhian.
So founder and CEO of Crucible, also the founder of the Open Meta Association. I think what we're going to end up shaping up as is a decentralized network of avatars, all sort of sovereign through credentials on the blockchain. Our product is an interface that ties it all together within the game engine. And from that comes the DAO next year for really sort of collective decision-making and governance within all of this as it unfolds.
Amazing. I'm going to stick with you, Rhian, for this question before we open it out to everybody. The metaverse is fast becoming part of our new reality. Everybody's talking about it. There was the Verge interview, obviously, with Mark Zuckerberg, but before that, it's creeping into everybody's experience and everybody's vocabulary. What does it actually mean? If you had to sum up in 1 or 2 sentences what the metaverse is, how would you describe it?
I see it as an evolution of the internet becoming much more game-like. So if the internet begins to move in a place where it's built by game developers, that is, to me, what the metaverse is. It's important that it's open. That's really a human thing. I think the internet is a powerful tool in our lives, and it's important that before we go through this transition, that we put it on open protocols and standards so that individuals are protected and they can benefit from it.
Justin, what's your perspective? How would you describe the metaverse?
So I think certainly, yes, it's this persistent sort of digital universe, but I see it as this next sort of evolution of the interface. And if you think in the context of commerce, maybe 30 years ago, all commerce was a kind of 3D immersive real life experience in a shopping mall or in a store. And then along came the web, and we got e-commerce, which is very much this kind of like 2D flat experience. And with the metaverse, what we're seeing now is a kind of re-expansion into a 3D immersive space. So it's got all the benefits of reality, which are 3D immersive, like super experiential, but with all the benefits also of digital, being like hugely social, and not bounded by things like physics. You can suspend a huge cube in the air relatively cheaply in the metaverse, not bounded by physics and cost.
And Jamie, I'm going to roll 2 questions into one here. The point we're making about the metaverse is that obviously it doesn't exist in isolation. It's just another part of our lives. And we need these ways to bridge the digital and physical world. So the idea of having an open metaverse economy with open metaverse commerce that links to our physical world is really important. And the reason why I wanted to ask you your ideas about what the metaverse is, I wanted you to expand on that with some detail about the paper that Outlier published, the Open Metaverse OS. So I'd be really interested to hear a kind of extended view on what the metaverse is and what the Open Metaverse OS is.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give an abbreviated one because otherwise I'll be here for an hour or so. So in terms of the metaverse, we look at it in 2 ways. So on the first hand, I think people get too caught up in understanding the metaverse based on specific technologies that usually are things that enhance the immersiveness of the experience. So it must be VR, it must be 3D. For us, the reality of the metaverse is it's an interface layer, which is a combination of hardware and software that allows for the blurring of physical and digital. And we're not too specific about what that combination of hardware and software is. It's just this thing that enables the blurring of physical and digital, things that are currently seen as separate or experienced separately. And so I think this is why Boson is a really good example of a metaverse technology, because it explicitly addresses the idea of transferring value or the value flow between physical and digital. The second thing is that for me, if you go back in science fiction and you look at some of the common themes as to define the metaverse, ultimately it was about there being an economic system that enjoyed supremacy to a platform or a nation state, particularly a nation state. And so, it must be the meta economy, the metaverse, the meta economy, singular. There are multiple metaverses. There are many verses, that might comprise the metaverse, but the metaverse is the unifying economic system. And so that could be that one platform or one company tries to create a monopoly over that experience in totality. Looks incredibly unlikely in the context of where we're heading. Or it could be that there is this open permissionless system that metaverses connect to allow for transferability of value. And so it's this latter one that we're focused on. And so I would argue that things like Fortnite are, wonderfully immersive game. Things like Oculus have built some brilliant hardware and software to allow you to experience VR, but they're actually not part of the metaverse because they are not connected to this single unifying universal economic system. And so if we look at the closest thing that we have that promises to allow for supremacy to fiat nation states and economies, is crypto. And so for us, you can't have the metaverse without having crypto. Crypto is actually the thing that enables the metaverse. Now, how you experience that, whether it's VR or AR and how ubiquitous that is, isn't so important. That'll happen. The most important defining thing for us is that economic layer. And for us, that is crypto.
Very cool. I think we can all agree on that. And having talked about the economic side of it, identity is obviously a really important component of this. And I'd like to bring in Rhian here. Now we've talked about how we interact with the economic structure of the metaverse. What does identity look like in an open metaverse? If you could just expand maybe on your opening comments about what you're doing at Crucible. I'm particularly interested in how the direct to avatar model can enhance pseudonymous transactions.
Sure, yeah. So I always like to remind myself that not everybody is familiar with the word credential. I certainly was not before I got into this. Credential is the way that we've always sort of like proven our identity. It's historically been given by governments or some central authority, and then on the internet, it's really been our emails. So anything you've ever used, your ID, your passport, your email, the things that you use to prove your identity are your credentials. We're moving towards a new form of credential that you can mint yourself, and that really hasn't really existed yet. You've needed a government or a company in order to do that. Even right now with COVID, right, we see the tests and the vaccines and the things that we need to rely on credentials from other sources. I am building on a self-sovereign identity standard in which you can mint these credentials on your own. And I make the case that I believe that our digital identities should be based on that. And so that's the core of it. Now, what you can build off of that foundation is now digital identities and personas that have wallets and decentralized services for commerce and communication. And that's what we're really focused on. So I think the only way to Web3 is through decentralization. I think we need to really stand our ground on that. I do believe there will be a Web2 metaverse of big tech companies that are going to try to build their own version of this. But the decentralized network on-chain that can reward people for what they contribute is where the most interesting things will happen.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We're here to talk about decentralization, in particular, decentralized commerce. So I'm going to bring in Justin first with this. We've got all these different things that people might want to buy or sell in the metaverse, as in the physical world. People might want to buy on-chain digital assets, off-chain digital assets. There's a big distinction between those. And hardest of all, physical things. From the metaverse. So we're going to unpack each of these different type of thing that you might want to buy or transact with and take a close look at each of them. But first, Justin, how can Boson Protocol solve this fundamental challenge of metaverse commerce?
Sure. I mean, picking up on a couple of the points that Jamie and Rhian made. So, I agree with Rhian that it's about pseudonymous commerce. If we've got this model where avatars are pseudonymously interacting and engaging in things like commerce, then a big problem that we have is, how do you trust a sort of pseudonymous individual? If we don't fully reveal identity, then if I sort of commit funds to make a purchase for an item, how do I trust that either I'll get that item or my money back? Well, the classic solution to that is trust an intermediary, and that's what we did with Web 2 and the promise of a sharing economy. And what happened is that those intermediaries, instead of delivering a sharing economy, abused this position in the kind of in the transaction. It abused this position and extracted these excessive profits, hoarded data, and just generally distorted the market. So, what Boson Protocol offers is a way to kind of create some of these credible guarantees between buyer and seller who are pseudonymous, that either the transaction will proceed, and in which case the buyer would get the item, or they will get their money back. And you mentioned these three different areas: on-chain, and on-chain, the whole of crypto is kind of built to enable those sort of transactions. And so Boson handles that. But I guess that's the easiest problem to solve. But then with digital as well, sort of off-chain digital, we enable that, regulate those transactions between unknown buyers and sellers to ensure that the digital transaction proceeds in that way as well. But the hardest is physical. And how do you, if you imagine a buyer and seller, two avatars that meet in the metaverse, identities are not revealed, how would they be able to commit to and execute a physical transaction without revealing identity? And that's exactly the problem that Boson Protocol solves, by having both parties make a kind of a financial commitment, which is locked up within an NFT, which is a very, very familiar form factor within the metaverse. And then using game theory, we use game theory to automate the regulation of this transaction without the need for a centralized intermediary.
Excellent explanation. And that brings me onto a question that I wanted to ask Jamie about this difference between on-chain and off-chain digital assets in the metaverse, because I remember last time we spoke about this, you were explaining how financial inclusion can actually be enhanced by unlocking some of this value. So I'd like to get a sense of how important this idea of being able to transact off-chain digital assets. And what do we mean by off-chain digital assets in the metaverse?
So the thing that's most exciting about the metaverse in the context of the open metaverse and things like DeFi is, as you say, the opportunity for financial inclusion. So what we mean by that is, if you think about all the forms of digital value that exist today locked in a platform, in a way that the creator of that value cannot transfer it out. They can't exit that digital economy. It's a closed economy. So it's a sunk cost, like the time and money that I spend in that platform, whether it's Instagram or Fortnite or whatever else, is a sunk cost. If I get bored of that platform or I get deplatformed, I lose all value. And even if I don't get deplatformed, and even if I can't transfer it, that value is not recognized by the existing financial system. So if I go to my bank and I say, listen, I'm a major esports gamer, I've got $5 million worth of skins and gaming items, I want to get a mortgage on a house, they'll laugh you out of the bank, right? I mean, they won't even give you that if you've got crypto, let alone digital skins. So you are financially excluded. And this is whole generations whose primary form of wealth is digital and trapped in a platform. So the power of the open metaverse is that either directly or indirectly, you can unbundle or unlock forms of digital value that may have a value on it, a monetary value or not. And you can begin to use that as collateral in DeFi. You can borrow and lend against it. So in an on-chain example, you can have your Axie or your Bored Ape or whatever it may be. I can freely trade it in a secondary market. I can sell it if I want. So I can mint it on platform A, and I can freely sell it anywhere I want, as long as it's kind of connected to the Ethereum blockchain or whatever else. But equally, I can borrow and lend against it. I can increasingly put that as collateral in DeFi. I can lock it up, borrow, get a short-term, long-term loan against it, do whatever I want with that money. I could cash it out into fiat and do something in the physical world, or I could use it to buy more things, grow my collection, speculate on crypto, ETH, Bitcoin, whatever. The point is, I am fully financially emancipated. I can do what I want with that. I'm in sovereign control of my wealth. So that's kind of the direct way you can do on-chain stuff, but there's also an indirect way. And I think this is a big opportunity for Boson, is that in the way that they solve for this transaction of value, which could be in the physical world. So we agree that there's a digital asset and we want to exchange it in some way. And then we meet up in the physical world and we hand over the physical item. Well, the same could be true in a platform without the platform's permission, right? I can say, I'm going to hand over this account to you, which owns these skins. I'm going to drop the skin. I'm going to lose the game, like whatever it is that allows me to transfer a value that's trapped in the platform by creating a derivative, like a thing token via Boson. We can agree to exchange this thing. We can make a commitment through a commitment token to exchange a thing through a thing token. And that can be in the physical world, or it can be in a closed platform without the permission of the platform. Now, I think what will happen is a lot of platforms, especially in the gaming context after the success of Axies and Play to Earn, are going to proactively look to move a lot of their assets on chain because they realize that people will value them more. And it creates a stickiness to the game. But I also think where they don't, users in a permissionless way will leverage technologies like Boson to create derivatives, to create black markets, to the point whereby there'll become so much trading volume in these black markets that the platform will go, well, shit, there's like $1 billion worth of trading that's happened in this black market, and we quite like to take a percentage of that. So you know what? Let's integrate into the Boson protocol or something else. So I think this is the power of what we call MetaFi. It's looking at leveraging DeFi and these kind of open permissionless marketplaces and applying it into the context of digital value in the metaverse. And that can be in a permissioned or a permissionless on-chain environment. The metaverse and MetaFi does not care. And I think that's like the exciting promise of what we're going to be looking at from a financial inclusion perspective.
I think that's amazing. And, for those of us who are used to thinking about these things, this seems entirely possible. And it's just a matter of bringing the rest of the world with us and getting people to understand why this is so important. Justin, I want to talk about go back to the subject of trading physical items in the metaverse and what some examples of that might look like. But first of all, I just want to quickly bring in Rhian. Jamie was obviously talking about centralized platforms like Fortnite. Coming from your perspective as a kind of gaming native person, do you see attitudes within the centralized gaming world changing to a wish to be more decentralized, or is that something that will come?
Certainly, absolutely. I think we have gotten to a place where it's a rational, logical conclusion to get to as a shareholder of a company who, outside of their business as usual, is watching all of this Web3 happen. And at the front end of these files are the same, right? So Fortnite skins and NFTs are the same front end. It's only the back end, whether it's on chain or off chain, that's different. And we're seeing over and over that even in the Angry Birds phase of all of this play to earn, like 8 to 10 times more spending is taking place. And none of these companies touch a single dollar of Web3 enabled revenue. They're going to want to take some of that off the table, especially when the spending is that much more. It is a paradigm shift because that spending is not all going directly to the publisher. It's decentralizing into each individual player. And that's something I'm helping all of them kind of think through and understand. But, certainly at least half of the industry is really embracing this and beginning to shape their strategy around it right now.
Rhian, what I just add to that is Giho of Axes describes it in a really succinct way. He says, look, when you give players property rights, like that they directly own the things that they've earned or bought, they place more value on them. They're prepared to invest more time, more money into them. So beginning part of this year, when we published the Open Metaverse OS, we reported, I think it was through Rhian, or a stat that Rhian came up with. I mean, Rhian is the source of all things Metaverse, right? He's the oracle. But like players spent 5 times more money in blockchain games than they did conventional games. And I remember when we quoted that, everyone was like, yeah, but the sample size is too small. You can't compare it to AAA games. Fast forward 7 months on, and Axie Infinity is grossing the highest revenue of any game on the planet monthly now. AAA, free to play, any gaming category from a base of 1 million players, which is
no comparison.
Doesn't even touch the sides of Fortnite, right? So, I mean, it's clearly demonstrated that if you give people property rights in a digital context, they will invest more time and money. And Gio also had this really interesting chart which looked at the churn rate of users month 1 and the first 6 months, and they're almost identical. Again, like unparalleled in gaming. And a lady from Lightspeed Ventures, whose name I always forget, she said, "Look, this chart shows somebody showing up to a job in the metaverse. This isn't them playing a game. This is them like showing up to work, and that's why you have this level of stickiness. It's not about playing a game anymore. These people are playing to earn an income, and this is a totally different paradigm."
Yeah. A couple other data points is 64% of players who buy skins want to buy more, but they need that real world value to it. So even though Fortnite is making 9 billion in 2 years just with skins, they want to spend more, and on average in these games, the ARPMAU is about, 1 to 4 to 5. And in Axie, it's around 10. So the spending is there. The appetite is there. The thing that companies need to wrap their head around is you're creating a market cap of GMV, right? Of gross merchandise value. It's not going to necessarily be the same type of revenue flow back to your publisher who's creating all the assets. You're releasing something and creating a publicly traded game economy from the very beginning. And it's going to take time, right? Like regulatorily and paradigm wise, it's going to take time. But to Jamie's point, I think why I'm excited about Play to Earn is I think it's a real source of social mobility. I think we're seeing that in sort of Southeast Asia and the Philippines. When I talk to publishers and developers, game developers, there is a sense of opportunity and responsibility. They're not just creating games, they're creating environments for future of work, for the future of how people will make a livelihood. And it really does, it matters for these people. It can be life-changing for 1 billion people. And that's why so much of us are really passionate about this, and we feel like it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I was going to bring you in, Justin, to talk about these changes.
Yeah, and thanks, Rhian. I mean, to really echo the points made, particularly on property rights, I think, if you look at these proprietary digital assets in Fortnite or Roblox and the future prospect of value of owning one of these things versus, owning one of the very first NFTs in this category. I mean, you're talking about owning a piece of history that will persist versus something that, if Roblox or Fortnite kind of, gets deleted, your asset gets deleted. And I think that future value is going to drive, massively drive us towards NFT, crypto-based assets versus proprietary assets, and I think that's what we're seeing with Axie.
It's interesting. If you go back to the history of Ethereum, this is why Vitalik created Ethereum, because he got really pissed off that he couldn't access an item in a game that he really cared about, that the publisher took away from the game.
Yeah. And Justin, while we're talking about NFTs, I'd just like to get back to this idea of open commerce for physical assets in a digital context. And I know that when we've spoken before, you've talked about items of the future having a digital identity as well as a physical identity. So this idea of digiphysical twins or digital twins. Can you talk a little bit about the use cases for that? Because I know that Boson enables this.
Sure. I think maybe 5 years from now, buying an item without a digital twin is going to be probably unusual and definitely kind of uncool. I think, what we're seeing is, we saw it first with humans, where we have this kind of digital cloud, LinkedIn, all of these different asset, kind of indicators, identity, etc. But what we're seeing from brands, and companies and sellers and creators is that physical items, the connection between physical items and digital ones. So a great example is, we have a partner, which is a large shopping mall kind of company, and they're looking to create a presence in the metaverse and connect that to their presence in the universe. And they see that, and they've kind of coined this term omniverse commerce. And what they want to do is offer an experience to their customers where you can go and shop in this 3D environment, and it's all connected. The items are connected, the physical spaces are connected, and you can go and purchase in the same way as we've seen this kind of melding between Web 2 and kind of digital and physical, but in a much more sort of substantive and meaningful way. This connection between digital spaces, physical spaces, and also items as well.
Yes, and I know that although we think about open commerce in this context as being something that obviously creates, as Jamie and Ryan have spoken to, this level playing field for all sorts of players. But I think it's really important to emphasize that established brands also benefit from this persistence that you're talking about. You mentioned just in this scenario that if an NFT, if something is an NFT that is on a persistent blockchain, it's ultimately of more value if it's open and public. This is really the case, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be, the value is the driver. The value to consumers is the driver for the consumer, and then ultimately for the seller behavior as well. And people, consumers want things of persistent value, and therefore it's driving the market towards that. I mean, the current paradigm is very centralized, proprietary, and let's create a walled garden and extract. But for the reasons I stated, that doesn't give persistent value, and people are choosing things with this kind of persistent, immutable value.
So I suppose the worst case scenario for everyone is if the existing Web 2 titans kind of get their way, and the metaverse of the future is not this open metaverse that we've been talking about. So obviously Mark Zuckerberg hit the headlines when he said that Facebook was ultimately going to be a metaverse company. What are the consequences if the Web 2 giants get their way and we carry on as we are? I'll go to Jamie first for this one.
Yeah, sorry, I was itching to answer this one when I came off mute. So actually, I agree with what Ryan said, but I disagree. So I agree that Web 2 wants to create an alternative to the metaverse, and for it to be closed, proprietary, or at least a permission consortia of players. But I think if we go back to my original definition of the metaverse as this open economic system, or an economic system that was proprietary but that somehow entirely monopolized our experience, then you only have to look at Facebook and its attempt at Libra, right? So Facebook and Oculus, or any of its other properties, has been incredibly successful at building digital experiences that take an inordinate amount of our time and attention. And as a consequence, deliver wealth, generate data, serve ads. But what they've been really bad at is trying to build an economic system that enjoyed supremacy to the state. And I remember when it happened, like, most regulators did not care about crypto until Facebook tried Libra. And this is why I love the fact that they came out with saying that they're a metaverse company, because all of a sudden regulators are panicking, going, shit, actually, what happens if Facebook creates and owns the metaverse? Because at the end of the day, Facebook is stoppable, and crypto and DeFi are unstoppable. So you can regulate the bridges between CeFi and DeFi. You can regulate how people move in and out of the fiat system and crypto, but you can't stop what happens in crypto. It's impossible. And it's permissionless, right? So for me, I'm not concerned that any one company or group of companies is going to be able to create an equivalent economic system, because, to be quite frank, they'll be stopped by regulators. They've already been stopped. Libra's a dead fish. It's not going anywhere. It's just getting increasingly watered down. So that's why I think long term, it's less of a concern. The only threat is that, as I said, Facebook, for example, is very good at creating very compelling hardware and software. And so, I think Oculus is a superior experience for VR. Its content library is pretty weak at the moment, but it's getting a little bit better. I use it, regularly to go into VR chat, but I just don't see how it can compete as an economic system for work and play with this unpermissioned system where anybody can plug into and create a more immersive experience. And then finally, like, one of the things that makes me more confident about that position is, as an accelerator, we've got a growing portfolio of near 100 startups now. We're about to accelerate another 100 in the next 12 months. And so many of those are now focused on enhancing the experience of Web3 in the context of AR and VR, both in terms of lo-fi, so making the kind of hardware requirement as low as possible for people to be able to jump in and start participating, earning, creating value, all the way through to people creating like high-end VR shopping experiences for NFTs, where actually you don't want to reduce the poly count of the item. You want it to be as beautiful as possible. You don't need any more than like a handful of people for a shopping party in that room at any one time. So we're seeing people extend and enhance the experience of the open metaverse, and well beyond what it is today, which, decentralized, great, but it's very limited. There's lots of retail experiences that just will never happen in there, because certain brands won't want to lose control of their retail experience. But all of that's going to change. So I believe that the open permission system wins, just because Facebook or anybody else, Google, doesn't have the manpower or the resources to compete with it in aggregate.
Interesting. Justin, what happens if the tech giants take control of the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as confident. I think, I think the value argument is the strongest one, that things have persistent value. But, just today I saw on Twitter that Facebook is doing a $50 million sort of fund, and I think the advantages of UX, if you've got a centralized system, are strong. So I think there's a good chance we will avoid that fate, but I'm not 100% confident. But I think what happens is what we've seen with Web 2 is this kind of total capture by these big sort of intermediaries, and essentially these platforms are value extraction systems, right? Highly tuned. We've got the strategy and business models in place to fund these value extraction systems that go and attract loads of consumers and then just extract maximum. And that's bad enough if you're spending a significant percentage, in Facebook, etc. But imagine if that becomes like this pervasive environment that we're living. We build like a digital prison, like Ready Player One or The Matrix. And then if you start thinking about commerce as well, we're way on the way to having the supply chain completely captured by one or a few intermediaries. So it's a pretty bleak future if we don't manage to have this open, permissionless, and fair metaverse economy.
Great answer. Rhian, your take, please, on what happens if the tech giants win before we go to the last question I'm going to ask before questions.
I mean, I think there's plenty of sci-fi steeped in paranoia for what that might look like. I'm always focused on the opposite, the metanoia, the sort of positive side of all of this. And I think you only really have to look at the passion around the communities of these things. There's no passionate community around Facebook. There's billions of users, and there's people that use it and are addicted to it. But you look at Web3 brands, and they're fully driven by people who this has become their life. And that's why more interesting things are happening in communities that are built on Web3, which is rewarding those people and changing their life and giving them a community to belong to. I don't see big tech doing that. There is a sort of like Web 2.5, like the Twitters of the world that are choosing to integrate with this. And I think they will continue to push out more. You look at Jack, right? He runs Square and Twitter, and yet Bitcoin is the most important thing in the world to him. And I think it's the people behind the companies. Mark has made it very clear who he is and why he makes decisions, and it's for shareholders. And I think shareholder value will not overshadow individual value in the future when there's something that's growing so fast that actually looks out for its users, and individuals can really use this and become in control of their life again. And you're going to have many other options. Some of them will be closed worlds. Some big tech companies will link together and create little mini metaverses, but they're going to feel like prisons. And not very many interesting things are going to happen.
Okay, one last question, and it's a quick one because we've got some questions that I'm going to put to you from the people who've been watching and listening. If you had to name one or maximum two things that have most excited you recently about metaverse tech, what would you say they are? What are the developments and the opportunities that have excited you most recently? And this is a free-for-all, so go first, whoever wants to.
I spoke on it a bit, but I think that the play-to-earn model scaled through the sort of like billion-person gaming industry is world-changing in ways that can move the needle for people's livelihoods. A lot of us are talking about games, but I think games are becoming a much bigger part of our life. And I think the opportunity for social mobility and for kind of an entire opportunity for like societies and cities to move into this and really start to design the way that these people live and the way that they make a living and the way that they relate with people and hang out with their friends. I see it as a lot of opportunity. The thing I'm worried about is it's all built on speculation at this point. And so there's going to be constant waves. And I think we need to be careful about that. That's why I created a DAO. I think there's a very sort of important ethical discussion that is just beginning, that will not end. And it's important that sort of every stakeholder is a part of it at every stage. So I feel very, very optimistic for the future of the potential that we have, but I also see that there's a shadow to it. So,
Justin, what has excited you most in terms of development and opportunities in the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Rhian has said, that this particular project would be Axie, and this kind of a sort of mainstream adoption of this entirely new sort of business model, where disenfranchised people are actually able to earn, and where we're seeing Web3 adoption, usage, and all of the metrics just blow Web2 out of the water. And I think that's the first signal that we've seen, that this kind of incentive fused new paradigm is capable of sort of out adopting Web2.
Yeah, exciting times. And Jamie?
Yeah, so again, I like to try to just look at it in totality. So the thing that excites me the most, I'm very privileged to work with amazing founders like Justin, like Rhian, who are very intentionally building these primitives and infrastructure for an open metaverse. And on the one hand, this is what I don't get. I don't get how you can be an economist and not be excited by this stuff. I mean, it is the biggest experiment in socioeconomics we've ever witnessed, real time, in a permissionless environment, where you can create several instances where you tweak the game theory behind it, and you can see how it can play out. And it can mobilize billions of people, billions of dollars of capital all around the world in this bottom-up game. And so the thing is, we don't need to get it right once. Like, we just need an environment, a permissionless environment, where experimentation can happen freely. And some experiments are not going to work, and some are going to work, but we'll be able to figure out not just which ones work, but which ones we want to participate in and which ones we want to exit from. And anybody can do that, as long as you've got an internet connection. And sadly, right now, the minimum hardware requirement is a smartphone. But if you've got those things, you can join this economic experiment, and you can opt in or out in a way that you just can't in the current political paradigm. Like, you're stuck in the country that you're in, and you just better hope that those politicians don't fuck it up, which, to be honest with you, I can't think of a single jurisdiction where that's not happening. So that's what really excites me. At the same time, this is driven by free market fundamentalism, which I think on the one hand is incredibly powerful. But if we've seen what's happened with hardcore libertarianism and the West Coast and Web2, like, unbridled on its own leads to monopolies. It can be very scary. Here we have both the power of free markets and the beginnings of kind of collectivism again, whereby you have the sovereignty of the individual. They can participate in these free markets, they can innovate, but they can kind of collectively pool resources, time, capital, money, resource, for public good, right? And in a way, you can look at something like Ethereum and say it is a public good. It's as much a public good as it is a technology, as it is a economic system. And again, you can freely move in and out of those things. And so as a system, I can't see how that's not going to work out. Because at the end of the day, what becomes dystopic, people will just migrate away from. And you compare that to the innovation that happens in a state context or in the context of a corporation. I mean, it's like make or break. They either get it wrong or they get it right. And if they get it wrong, usually all is lost. So, it's just an order of magnitude better system for innovation, competition, and hopefully that ultimately yields a benefit for us as citizens and users. As you can tell, I'm an eternal optimist. So
All right, we'll end the formal bit of the panel on that very optimistic note. We like optimism. We've got a heap of questions here. We're probably not going to get through all of them in the time we've got left, but I'll take as many as I can. So I can just answer the top question quite quickly myself. What is the first step in the process of creating an online store using Boson technology? I would say we're building a developer community. Come on over to our Discord. We've got a grants program. We've got all kinds of information and stuff we can share. So join our Discord, and we'll look forward to seeing you over there. Next question. Shout out to Jamie, fascinating perspective by Jamie. But now the question I think is actually for Justin. How can Boson keep the actors, users honest in terms of representing the true value of items up for trade speculation or collection, especially if they're physical items transitioning to digital? Thank you, Amit, for that. So Justin, how does Boson keep actors honest?
Well, I think actually there's two questions there. I mean, how do we keep actors honest? Well, there's a two-stage mechanism. One that uses game theory and deposits to keep actors honest and attempt to automate that. So yeah, I mean, buyer and seller have a deposit that's placed within an escrow within an NFT, and it's a game that's designed to incentivize them to behave fairly. And if they don't, then it can be escalated to kind of human arbitrators. So that's the first thing. But I think there was another part of the question, which was fair value. What Boson enables is for real world items or physical physical, digital or on-chain items to also be represented as like ERC20s that can flow around the DeFi system, but also we can do things like price discovery on bonding curves. So if you think about Unisocks, where you have price discovery via this sort of ERC20, well, we have this mechanism of like a generalized Unisocks. So we can bring to bear all the kind of financialization of DeFi in order to price fairly, physical assets as well.
Cool. I just need to make a non-panel announcement here. Unfortunately, the POAP has proved so popular that we've all broken the Decentralized POAP dispenser. But do not fear, you can head over to Telegram for a follow-up when it's running again. You have not lost your chance to mint the POAP. Wow. But everyone wants them. What can we say? One final question I think we've got time for. Boson will work on second layers. Question.
I think that's one for me. Yeah, I mean, I think will Boson work on layer 2s? Yes, absolutely. I mean, there is an underlying problem of scalability, which we are kind of looking at intently. There are a number of great layer 2s and some other solutions as well. I think balancing these scalability solutions, we also need to look at the whole social coordination around Ethereum, other chains, etc. So I think that is a question and a challenge not unique to Boson, that we are in the space we're all looking at what the best solution is, and also the solution that others are coordinating around.
Right, I'm going to stop pestering exclusively you with questions, Justin, because people can, of course, join Telegram and Discord if they're if they want to find out more. In the very limited time we have left, I'm just going to ask a very quick and interesting question. From Amit, when will the Metaverse discussion start happening about non-gaming assets? Now, I'd argue that we're already talking about non-gaming assets in the sense of open Metaverse commerce. Couple of sentences, please. When do we stop talking about this as an exclusively gaming phenomenon? I'll go to you first, Jamie.
Yeah, so obviously we've been talking about gaming and play to earn just because I think it's been a breakout category in the context of NFTs and the metaverse. But actually in the accelerator, we're running 3 cohorts concurrently at the moment, so 30 startups. And I would say 60 to 70% of those are metaverse related, and they're across all sorts of different use cases, be that dCommerce, decentralized commerce, as Justin and I use as a term, music, the creator economy. So again, other forms of digital value that are currently tracked in platforms, but that could be atomized and then used as a way of tracking value flow or collateral. So I would say that, bearing in mind a lot of these projects are still pre-seed stage, so very early, that probably Q1 of next year, we're going to see several new use cases break through, new categories of understanding crypto, Web3, NFTs, and DeFi in the context of the metaverse. And the cool thing about NFTs are, sorry, you said a few words, but the cool thing about NFTs are there are infinitely more non-fungible use cases than there are fungible. Fungible in terms of currency and commodity are quite limited and narrow. Non-fungible is literally anything, you know, from ticketing, commerce, retail, you know, you name it. Startups are exploring it. So yeah, definitely expect beyond gaming to happen Q1 2022.
Okay, we are really running out of time now. I'm going to ask Justin and Rhian each in less than a minute to talk about the non-gaming use cases that are coming. Justin first.
Sure. I mean, my view and the Boson view is that, yeah, all of commerce will be decentralized. And, you know, Boson's long-term aim is to be like this TCP/IP, this kind of clearing rails for commerce. So to echo Jamie's point, yeah, everything non-fungible.
Rhian, less than a minute, please. Your view.
So I find myself in a position where these brands are reaching out to me now. And frankly, there isn't a single brand that isn't thinking about this. And I think what's become clear is that this is the internet. And so they've all witnessed and experienced the impact that the internet has had, and they're not going to just ignore this, right? There's a different speed in which they're going to execute. But the reason I sort of shaped up this direct to avatar concept is because this is a shift in supply chain, and most all products that can go fully digital will, and they're going to find communities of people who are avatars as an end user. And so, like, we've gone through direct to consumer as a shift in supply chain, and probably couldn't have survived COVID without it. We're now going to do the same shift. So it's not just game assets or game items. That's just where billions of people are doing this already. In the future, everything will feel like a game, but it's gonna be much broader and you know, more all-encompassing than just what you think of as a game right now.
Cool. Amazing panel. Thank you so much for your time and answers, everybody. Thank you to everybody who came along. Just one reminder announcement before we wrap up. We are hiring senior blockchain engineers, a global director of ecom and a QA engineer. Head over to the Greenhouse Jobs board, and any questions that didn't get answered, we have regular AMAs. So stay in touch on Discord and Telegram, and we'll see you there. Thanks all for a great event. See you in the metaverse.